You see that? They're planning something. Look at all of them whispering over there. No, I'm gonna go. And that's when I seen Benny. Standing over at the pool table. Boy, who's that good-looking guy over at the pool table?
Oh, Kathy, you don't want to go out with him.
Why not? They don't look like the rest of these animals.
Because nobody wants to go out with him.
Why?
Because he cracks up on his bike. Every time he gets up on his bike, he has an accident.
Oh, okay.
Let me get you a pop.
Hey. I'm Benny.
Hello? Well, so what are we doing here? Just, shooting the breeze?
Yeah, I guess.
Well, I gotta go home.
Oh. Okay. You gotta go.
As I was watching it, it kind of reminded me of a genre that I love, which is the hangout movie. Because not much of anything really happens in terms of like how deeply do we get into like the souls of these characters, like what do they care about, what are they striving and fighting for. And really this is just a story about a bunch of guys who like motorcycles and just wanted people to hang out with and a place to do it at, because that is the foundation of every biker club in the country. No matter like when it started or why, whether they were Vietnam vets coming back or if they were just, greasers who just, got sick of dealing with pinko college people, and just couldn't fit in anywhere else. These communities offered, something to them. And this movie in its own way just kind of shows you what these people would do at a certain era in a certain place. And it's very authentic. Everything feels very, believable and true. But as far as a filming, like a film-going experience, it's just kind of a downer. At least it was for me. It was a big kind of, of a bummer of an ending, because everything kind of falls apart. You're not left with the euphoria that you get from like watching something like Dazed and Confused, where it does much of the same thing, but it has a very different mission and it's more enclosed. And this is just one sad thing after another. It's like the Iron Claw of biker movies.
Welcome to Theater and Stream, a film podcast. I am Matt, that is Chuck, and this is episode 46. After a 7-year directing drought, Jeff Nichols is back with his new film, The Bikeriders. I'd call Nichols a sort of redneck auteur. His films tend to focus on rural areas, those of lower income, working class characters who just barely scrape by. With The Bikeriders, he sort of sets his sights on 1960s-era motorcycle clubs. So what did Chuck and I think? We'll get to that a bit later in the show with today's featured review. The rest of the episode today is going to consist of one small but very important news item as we mourn the loss of another acting titan. And then we'll also talk about what else we've been watching the last 2 weeks in the watch list. And as always, we'll close out the show with the Mentionables, where we send you packing on your way with a non-film recommendation. If you like what we're doing here on the channel, please do throw us a like or subscribe. But before we begin in earnest, just one bit of housekeeping here. You may have noticed that nothing was uploaded to the channel last week, and we do always try and at least upload one thing every week, whether that be a mini-sode or a podcast, but last week got away from us a bit, so we were both dealing with various things in our lives, and so that's kind of just the way it has to be when, you know, you just kind of do this podcast thing on the side as like a side project. And so we will be back to our regularly scheduled programming this week and next week. But yeah, just wanted to get that out there. Chuck, anything you wanted to say in regards to any of that?
Well, I'll be upfront and apologize. It's my fault that there wasn't anything. I was preparing for a vacation and got some unfortunate news that just kind of distracted me in preparation of that. And we will get into my whole vacation experience later on in the show. Because first, yeah, like I got this news while I was sitting on my deck, you know, drinking coffee one morning, and that's our man, Donald Sutherland, the guy from Canada, Mr. Reliable, probably one of the finest actors we've had in like the last 100 years. Had passed away, and like from the sounds of it, it was in the comfort of his home, or at least a hospice, surrounded by family, and it kind of was expected. But like, what was the last movie that this guy was credited in? Do you know that? I am unsure.
Yeah, I guess I don't know. I mean, I know he did a voiceover role for that last Hunger Games prequel. It wasn't actually in the movie,
yeah.
but
Oh God, that's really sad if that's what it was.
But I'm not sure what his actual last on-screen role was. I know one of the movies I was going to bring up, you know, as we talked about this was, you know, more recently he was in Ad Astra, and you know, he played Brad Pitt's dad in that, and that's kind of the thing. Those are the first two things I thought of when I thought about this guy, is just how he's kind of like a one-scene wonder in some ways, where, you know, I thought about his role in JFK, where he shows up for one scene. He plays this guy that's just named X, and he basically sits there while Kevin Costner has a stupid look on his face, and just like info dumps all this like conspiracy stuff about the JFK assassination. And then, yeah, in Ad Astra, it was the same thing. You know, he shows up at the end of the movie as this sort of Marlon Brando Apocalypse Now role, where he's sort of been the imposing figure over the rest of the movie, and then he kind of just shows up at the end. And so that's kind of what I thought of, you know, initially. I don't know. What did you think of? What are your favorite roles of his, or what makes you think of Sutherland?
Don't Look Now, that classic, like, I guess, horror thriller that is just has it's a wackadoo movie with, you know, some really explicit sex in it, but his 70s Jewfro is just really like burned into my brain. I remember watching him in MASH, but I didn't really get a lot out of that. But as far as stuff I'm going to remember him for, Don't Look Now is definitely up there. I'm trying to pull up his you know, performances, and everything is just incomplete that I'm looking at here.
Well, he's just kind of one of those guys who he had such a
Klute is one.
Klute, yeah.
Yeah. The Dirty Dozen. I forget that he is in stuff like that. And then
Invasion of the Body Snatchers. And and he played Mr. Dashwood in I think is it the most recent Pride and Prejudice movie. Yeah, the Keira Knightley one. And but he is just that dude that you just plug and play in Hollywood. You just need someone to have some gravitas and to be a recognizable name, and he was your guy. And that role in JFK in particular is memorable because he just exists to be a conspiracy lore dump Yeah.
to set up all of the like the shit that because he's actually like playing an amalgam of different people that actually existed in that movie. But
Sure.
yeah, like I just expected his character to do so much more than what he actually does. But because it's Kiefer Sutherland, and he's like, no, I am just here to just go ooh and then disappear. But I think most people probably know him for the Hunger Games.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
Ironically.
as President Snow. Yeah, I mean, I say what you will about those movies, the quality of the movies, but he was definitely probably one of the best things about those. Him and Philip Seymour Hoffman, the two like just titans that were in those movies for some inexplicable reason. But yeah, I mean, the guy had such a weird face, and I think that benefited him his entire career, where his range was so crazy. He could play like a genial grandfather type character who is imparting wisdom, or he can play, a megalomaniac dictator, and he just kind of he was a chameleon. And I know that like that sort of brought him a lot of trouble too, because have you ever seen his Charlie Rose interview
No.
where he talks about, yeah, I think it was Charlie Rose. He talks about how when he was a kid, he one time he asked his mom if he was handsome, and his mom basically said no, like she told him no. And he like he's sitting there and he starts like crying in the middle of this Charlie Rose interview, and it's clear that he had some sort of hang up with like his appearance,
Wow.
because he's not I think he grew into his face, as he got older. He kind of got that like sort of old man, like good looking old man, but when he was younger, he definitely was a lot more weird looking, I guess. And so
Yeah,
it clearly bothered him. And so yeah, go check out his Charlie Rose interview too,
that's
if you
interesting.
want to do something. Yeah.
I'm gonna look into that. He
Hmm.
has one posthumous release scheduled, but there is no date for it. A movie called Heartland. He'll be playing a character named Rick. Until then, yeah, it's voice only and it's archive audio from A Ballad of Songbirds of Snakes in his role
Sure.
of President Coriolanus. I can't say that. But he's definitely. He didn't actually record anything new for it.
Okay.
And I forget that he was in Moonfall. But
Yeah,
he was,
Moonfall.
he was, but yeah, and some of these are like straight to video, like garbage. Like he was in Backdraft 2, the same year that Ad Astra came out. And yeah, as for like like that whole question of like, well, like if he wasn't handsome, he definitely was just distinctive,
Distinctive,
and
yeah.
that stood out in the decade of like the late 60s, 70s, where he really kind of came up as an actor. Is like he had a really good run. You know, just
Oh
looking
yeah,
at
for sure.
just
In
from
those early
those
years.
early years, he was in all kinds of neat stuff. But if there's one that I'm probably gonna pick up and watch again, honestly, now that he has died, it's probably gonna be the Murder by Decree. Have you ever seen that movie?
I haven't, no.
Okay, just for the sake of it, of getting into this, it is a 1979 Sherlock Holmes movie that explores
Okay.
the theory that was the foundation for From Hell.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that
Yeah.
like Sherlock Holmes was Jack the Ripper. Is that the theory?
No.
No.
He is just investigating the Masonic royal conspiracy behind Jack the Ripper to cover
Okay.
up the secret love child of the Prince of Wales.
Okay.
That's why all the and he just plays like a random character in it who's like a mason. And I forgot that he was in it, but yeah, Chris Plummer plays Holmes, James Mason plays Watson, and then you have
Okay, that
Kiefer
sounds-
Sutherland and like John Gielgud. It's a solid entry, and I think people should check that one out. Honestly, if they're gonna check
Yeah.
out anything.
Yeah, good recommendation. Yeah, but yeah, he will be missed, and yeah, we will watch some movies sort of in his stead. And I'm sure, I mean, I saw like in the Variety article for this that he did die in Miami, Florida, and I'm pretty sure he died on like his like estate. So he was in a pretty good place, I think. And so yeah,
Just
he
getting
will be
dosed with, gin and Ativan, like that's from my experience watching my elderly loved ones die, that was the golden cocktail towards the end. Not to be morbid, but that's what keeps you comfortable. That's what I want to have. I want Bombay Sapphire and some Halcyon or something like that. But now to move on to the watch list here. This looks interesting. It is like Whiplash meets gymnastics, or like extreme like dance cheerleading.
Yes, yeah. We're talking about Backspot. This is, I'm glad you brought that up. That's exactly what this is. It's like, it's what if
just letting it
Whiplash,
happen.
but instead of drumming, it's about cheerleading. And specifically, this is about like the world of top level competitive cheerleading. And I guess more than anything, this movie is kind of like a denouncement of people that look down on cheerleading or say that it's like not a sport in some way. You get all these shots of like noses getting broken, or like girls falling like 20 feet from the top of pyramids and like breaking their ribs, and like just like their fucked up feet, and like people getting hit in the face, kicked in the face and like spitting blood. And so it's like, it's pretty extreme for a movie about cheerleading. And so that's kind of the message it tries to hammer home, is like, this is a competitive sport where people get injured all the time. And like Whiplash, there is the asshole coach character, but in this movie it's played by Evan Rachel Wood, who, she's good at playing these stone cold bitches, and this is sort of no different. And she is this, in Whiplash, J.K. Simmons prefers to yell and throw things, but in Backspot, Evan Rachel Wood, she's going to let you know that she thinks the question that you just asked was so stupid by just glaring at you, or just giving you like 10 seconds of silence. Or she's going to let you know that the reason why she thinks you're not hitting your cues is because you gained 10 pounds of fat over the last 2 weeks, and she thinks that you need to lose it. And so that's kind of the way she prefers to coach. And yeah, she's very good at playing these sort of bitchy roles. But yeah, Backspot it's mostly about this girl named Riley. She is sort of a second string cheerleader who has ambitions to make the top squad. And in this movie, she's played by Devery Jacobs, who's one of my favorite actresses from the show Reservation Dogs.
Okay.
And yeah, she really put in the work. I mean, if you make a film about top level cheerleading, you either need to teach your actors to do cheerleading, or you need to get really creative with like camera angles and body doubles. And you can tell that she knows her shit. Like, she actually learned this stuff, or she already knew it from like her high school days or something. And so there's a lot of really, really interesting like cheer routines. And the movie ends with a cheer routine that is all shot in one take, and it's absolutely fantastic. And so yeah, this one gets my full-throated recommendation. And yeah, really, really great stuff, I thought.
Right on. That's interesting. Does it have that kind of ambiguous, like, moral question like Whiplash does, or is it a little more straightforward in like what the drama is actually getting into? Like, does she have this like moment of, oh no, none of this is worth it, I'm just ruining my relationships? Or is she just like, no, like, this is my life and my mission, this is all I care about?
No, it's definitely a little more straightforward. By the end, she sort of learns to balance things out a bit, because the main character also, she has OCD, and one of the ways in which it sort of comes out is she like picks her eyebrows. Like, she literally like picks the hairs out of her eyebrows, and it's really, really gross to watch. But sort of the way that her OCD manifests, and basically it ends in a place that is a lot more traditionally happy than Whiplash. And so if that's something you're looking for, I would say that's kind of would be more your bag than Whiplash. But yeah, very, very good stuff. And I would say if you want to drop a $6 on a movie rental, it's definitely a good place to go these days.
Well, that's interesting. I'm gonna probably have to check that out if I ever see it pop up on one of my many streaming services that I mostly had to do without this week. We were at the mercy of our DVD collection out at the lake and what we could get over the air digital, which was surprising. We could watch Big Daddy on the Laugh Network at 7:00 in the morning. But one thing we watched more than any other in the last week was the DreamWorks Aardman co-production, Aardman's first fully CG animated feature film, Flushed Away, starring Hugh Jackman, Kate Winslet, Ian McKellen, and just a pretty solid voice cast all around. People like Bill Nighy and Andy Serkis, amongst many others. And the premise is just pampered pet rat gets invaded by a hoodlum sewer rat and gets flushed down the toilet and discovers Retropolis, wants to get home, and then gets roped into an adventure with the help of Rita here, who's the captain of the Jammy Dodger, a sewer pirate ship. And they're pursued by the henchmen of the Toad, voiced by Ian McKellen, who wants a jewel. He also wants this cable because he has evil plans for flushing Retropolis away using the collective force of the halftime toilet breaks from the World Cup happening that day. That's the premise of it. But you have these slugs serving as a Greek chorus singing pop tunes, and just overall incredibly wholesome. It's way better than I expected it to be. I was like, ew, really? We're going to watch this? But November has discovered it on streaming, and we just so happened to have a DVD copy of it that Angie's dad had collected. And so now we have it, and we watched it probably 7 times. Multiple times a day. Because it's just like, this is during when it was gloomy and raining, and Jaws is too boring for this 4-year-old. I'll let you know.
Too boring.
Jaws was not exciting. And and we could only watch those other movies so many times, so it became Flushed Away week instead. But
so is that like I'm kind of curious. You said it was a co-production between DreamWorks and Aardman.
Yeah.
And in that sort of split of studios, who do you think had more sway as far as like the creative direction of this film? Like
Aardman.
Is it more Aardman? Okay,
yeah.
Really? Okay, interesting.
The advertising and promotion of the film, though, unfortunately, very much in DreamWorks' hands, and it shows. Like, if I had the audio on for this, trailer that I'm running right now, you would not want to see this movie. They do such a bad job of selling it. And this is like them coming right off of winning an Oscar for Wallace and Gromit, The Curse of the Were-Rabbit. Mm-hmm. They were at the peak of their powers, and it shows in the movie. But this trailer, it just made me gag while I was listening to it while I downloaded it. I was just like, oh, why would you do it like this? And I'm just reminded, oh yeah, this is the same company that made Shark Tale. This is the same company that made Madagascar. Because that's another thing I want to kind of bring up, this lost aspect of DVD watching. Is the unskippable previews that they have at the beginning. And oh my god, the one that they had for Madagascar that was just Ben Stiller telling you beat for beat what happens in the movie as himself, just surrounded by crates that say Madagascar on them. I'm just like, is this how we advertised films? This is how we created franchises back in the aughts? It just blew my mind. that was the approach they took, because like I guess they did the same thing with B movie, but we all remember how that worked out. That didn't work out very well at all.
No. That's so funny. Yeah, because I remember when this movie came out, when Flushed Away came out, because I was working at the theater at the time, and they used to play trailers over the concession stand, and so I have seen this trailer so many times because it was just a constant loop of like an hour of just a loop of the same trailers. So yes, I am very familiar with this. And yeah, you're totally right. Yeah, the trailers in the 2000s were wild. They used to make like specific short films for the Ice Age movies. I don't know if you remember that, but
Yeah.
all the trailers for the Ice Age animated movies were just that stupid rat character chasing after that nut.
Scrat.
Those were the trailers. Yeah.
Did you know that in the very last Ice Age movie, he finally gets it?
He gets it.
He finally
Well, I would hope.
he finally gets to eat that acorn or whatever. Well, time for a palate cleanse of something spooky. I forgot that this was happening, and I really want to fucking watch it now after seeing the trailer for this. So why don't you tell us about what we got coming from Joko Anwar?
Yeah, the Indonesian horror director. He has a new Netflix series, Nightmares and Daydreams, and it's essentially Twilight Zone mixed with Cabinet of Curiosities. I'm a huge Joko Anwar fan. Loved Satan's Slaves, loved Impedagore, and this. Unfortunately, there's 7 episodes of this.
1 second.
And the man himself only directs 2 of the 7, and the other 5 episodes are kind of directed by largely nobodies. And I looked it up on IMDb. I wanted to know, who are these directors that are directing these other episodes? And unfortunately, it's mostly like Indonesian soap opera directors stuff. And so some of the episodes don't quite coalesce. The ideas are still really interesting because Joko Anwar did write all of the episodes, and so there's really interesting ideas in all of them. Like there's one about a nursing home which makes its residents age in reverse, and there's one about an author, like trashy crime fiction author who basically needs to astral project herself into the bodies of crime victims in order to write her books.
Interesting.
And so there's all these weird ideas, and I would say watch them all because it is kind of like Twilight Zone, where there are hit and miss episodes, but for the most part they're sort of all worth watching. But if you only can give this show 2 hours of your time, watch the first episode and the last episode, because those are the 2 that are directed by Joko Anwar, and those are clearly, the best ones. And so, yeah, that's kind of what I would say. It's very, very similar to Cabinet of Curiosities, if that was kind of your bag. And that was my bag for sure. And so, yeah, worth watching.
I like the idea of, I don't know, because Angie and I recently rewatched our favorite Cabinet of Curiosity episodes, and it just made me want another season of that. But if I can't get another season of that, I like the idea of them just going oh, okay, preeminent horror filmmakers, you just get to have your little anthology thing where you can just do whatever the fuck you want. And you want to bring your weirdo nobody soap opera directors and give them a chance to do something that a lot of people will see? Cool, let's do that. That's a good use of Netflix's money, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the very little amount of money that they gave to this, because some of the effects are pretty dodgy in some of these episodes, but it's fine. It doesn't ruin it in any way. But yeah, it is I like that they're actually putting themselves out there, because I'm sure that the title of this show is literally Joko Anwar's Nightmares and Daydreams, and I'm sure that most people that log on to Netflix and see that are like, who the fuck is Joko Anwar? And so I'm glad that Netflix actually is willing to put some money out there for that.
Okay, what's the guy who did Where Evil Lurks?
Oh God. Yeah, that's
Give
I
that
can't remember it to be
give
honest.
that
But yeah,
guy an anthology.
yeah, that would be awesome.
That'd be good
for
shit.
sure.
Transitioning now to a quick hit because there isn't going to be much to talk about with it quite yet at this time. But we did get one episode of the second season of House of the Dragon, which is a very expensive TV show that is actually worth your time. Even though this latest episode was just kind of a traditional Game of Thrones style, let's just get this old beast, chugging down the train, as slowly and reliably as possible. But what did you get out of it beyond the last 10 minutes?
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, we're gonna come at this pretty, I think, in an interesting fashion because, from what I understand, I haven't read the book that this is based on, but you have, and so I had no idea what to expect. And a lot of this first episode is a lot of reestablishing of relationships and table setting for the forthcoming season. But it's still, I mean, I will maintain that House of the Dragon, so far anyways, is better than anything in the last like 2 seasons of Game of Thrones. And this show still has the feeling of like old Game of Thrones to me, where like the first couple seasons of Game of Thrones, when it was more about the politics and the intrigue and stuff like that, and less about these like giant CGI battle scenes and stuff like that. And so yeah, I still really like the place that the show is in. But yeah, that final sort of stretch of this episode was
The blood and cheese scene.
yeah, very, very, I mean, just crazy. I thought, as somebody who didn't know what was going to happen, it almost, it kept me off balance. I felt like that last 10 minutes where it's like, okay, so clearly what's going to happen is these two guys they're going to sneak into the castle and they're going to get really close to committing murder. And then at the last second, like a sword comes in from off screen and like cleaves their heads off and everything's fine. But then it just like happens and it's so like dispassionate and like quick, and you just hear like these noises off screen that are
awful.
just like gross. And so yeah, it left me in a place where I was like, wait, did that just happen? Did it literally just happen? It was almost like a blink and you miss it type thing. And I was like, holy shit, I think they actually just like killed that person. And like,
yeah.
And so, yeah, I felt very off balance. I felt very what just happened? And so I kind of liked that feeling that the show gave me. But yeah, what did you think about that?
I did like how they transitioned right from that grisly moment directly to Alicent and Crispin just banging and just getting interrupted mid coitus and having to be like, oh, what the fuck? Why are you in here with our granddaughter? So and so is dead. Just like, and I guess now I'm gonna tell you what actually happens, at least because that's the thing about Fire and Blood. If you read that, what you're getting is two different historical interpretations of these events. There's some things that, because like one is written by a maester and the other is written by like a jester named Mushroom, and they have things that they're similar on, and other times you get varying interpretations that keep it somewhat ambiguous. And there have been moments from the first season where things that were ambiguous in the book were, I guess, more solidified because of the creative choices that the team behind House of the Dragon has had to be, because you can't be ambiguous. Like George R. R. Martin can be. And what happens with Blood and Cheese, November? I need you to be quiet for a second. Well, then maybe you should color on the table instead of on the floor. Sorry. But what happens is that there's a third child. It's not just two, like a boy and a girl. There's another son. And Blood and Cheese show up, and they're like, all right, we are here to kill one of your kids, a son for a son. Now you decide, the mother of the children, we need you to decide which of them is going to die. And if you don't decide, we're going to rape your child daughter and then kill you all. And then she's like, okay, kill Magor. Magor isn't in the show. He isn't born yet. And instead of killing Magor, Blood and Cheese look at the boy and they go, did you hear that, boy? Your mother wanted you to get killed. And then they just chop off the head of his brother in one swipe of a sword. And then they take his head and then they leave. And that is an important moment in like the whole, as the story goes on. I forget the mother's name, but she like can't look her son in the eye anymore. And he's all fucked up because he has this traumatic memory, and like all of that plays out over the years as the story progresses. But the filmmakers took this cop out of, oh, well, you can't do that with child actors. And I'm like, bullshit, you can't work around that. I don't know. I feel like they easily could have done that. Because like that is a pretty iconic, to me anyway, moment from Fire and Blood. They do their interpretation of it and it works, but it does mess things up as for like who's supposed to be alive going forward through the story. You know, so I don't know. Like some things stay the same, some things change, and ultimately I think we're heading towards the same outcome that I've spoiled for myself, you know, having read it. But it did make me just kind of feel like, oh no, you guys could have, the things you've done on this show involving children, you know, like in Game of Thrones historically, and in this, like you could protect the children on set and still have all that awfulness be expressed. Like they're acting like they did some principled, you know, and creative thing, and I'm like, no, you just pussied out, you know, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, no, you're most certainly right. I mean, there are ways to get around that stuff. I mean, you can literally like, you know, those kids don't even necessarily have to be on set when
exactly
the dialogue is being spoken. You can just tell the kids to make a bunch of reaction shots, and then when the actor is actually giving the dialogue about, you know, raping and killing them, the kid doesn't even have to be on set. You know, it doesn't even have to hear that. You know, and so yeah, there are definitely ways around that, and yeah, most certainly you're right. They probably could have done that. But I mean, I do think what we got, I mean, I guess I don't know where this ends up, but I think what we did get is still good though.
Oh yeah.
If that makes any sense. Like I think
it's still effective.
Yeah, still effective. And so yeah, really looking forward to where this season goes. It's nice to have a good like big show back again, you know, like a high budget big show back again, like something
to
like
have a Stark on the wall. Like I kind of liked that. I'd like to see it, like even though I don't think we're going to see that character again until like the third or fourth seasons, you know, the way that the story goes. We got that one scene with the guy in this episode, and I think that was it with Krieg and Stark, but he becomes very important as the war winds down. If they explore it that fully, we'll have to see. But all the same, it's like looking at, and that's the thing. Like this show looks like it. They spent the money on it that they advertised to us that they spent. And have you? This is way off topic, so I'm going to drop House of the Dragon off of it. Not the screen here, but have you watched a single second of The Acolyte?
No, I don't even have. I haven't had Disney Plus in like 3 or 4 months. Yeah, I'm just not interested.
Good for you. Because I have it through my phone plan. It's just like a free throw-in that I get, and I would not have Disney if not for the children behind me who live off of it. And there's like something I found out, like some how the sausage is made information. Don't know if it's true exactly, but when they say, "Oh yeah, we're spending like $130 million on your Star Wars show," or however much it is, like Disney or like whatever, whoever, like the platform or distributor, the studio, broadcaster for the show, they take a cut of that budget. And the actual working budget that you have episode to episode is probably like 30% less than advertised.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, totally.
But even then, it should not look as bad as that show does. I'm
sure they're using. I mean, are they using like what's it called? What is that technology that like Jon Favreau used for Mandalorian?
Oh yeah, what the fuck was that? I think I can't remember what it's called.
Landscape, or something like that. Or
it's like
void or something.
Because they're like, it's instead of a green screen, they just have colors. Kind of get like it's like rear projection.
Well, giant projections. Like that's all it is. It's like incredibly high resolution projections of landscapes, basically, is what it is. And I'm sure that they're probably using that for this. And that is not like yes, it is a cool technology, but it is by no means an expensive way to make a show.
No.
And so I'm sure that's exactly what they're doing with the Acolyte.
Because let me tell you, they got to get back in the actual desert, if you know what I mean. Have those fake speeders driving around in Tunisia. Kind of like with our main review today. Those are real actors on real bikes, I am assuming. And when it came to this movie, as I was watching it, it kind of reminded me of a genre that I love, which is the hangout movie. Because not much of anything really happens in terms of like how deeply do we get into like the souls of these characters, like what do they care about, what are they striving and fighting for. And really this is just a story about a bunch of guys who like motorcycles and just wanted people to hang out with and a place to do it at, because that is the foundation of every biker club in the country. No matter like when it started or why, whether they were Vietnam vets coming back or if they were just, greasers who just, got sick of dealing with pinko college people, and just couldn't fit in anywhere else. These communities offered, something to them. And this movie in its own way just kind of shows you what these people would do at a certain era in a certain place. And it's very authentic. Everything feels very, like believable and true. But as far as a filming, like a film going experience, it's just kind of a downer. Like at least it was for me. It was a big kind of, of a bummer of an ending, because everything kind of falls apart. You're not left with the euphoria that you get from like watching something like Dazed and Confused, where it does much of the same thing, but it has a very different mission and it's more enclosed. And this is just one sad thing after another. It's like the Iron Claw of biker movies. And a lot of it worked, for me in general. I didn't really care for Tom Hardy's accent. Like, I don't know what he is doing or who he's trying to be, but it's not anybody that actually has ever existed in the Chicagoland area. It just isn't quite what it's advertised as. It's not Sons of Anarchy. It's not quite the feel-good movie of the summer either. But for people of a certain age and with a certain identity group attachment, they'll probably get a lot out of this and see a lot of themselves in it. But what did you think of it?
Yeah, I mostly like this. I mean, it's just like pure Americana is kind of the way that I would describe it. It's, very authentic, I think, to this time period. It made me like all of those shots of people riding motorcycles through like, rural flatland areas with like crops on the sides of the road and barns and stuff, just like really made me nostalgic for like rural North Dakota,
Yeah.
even though this isn't set anywhere near there. You know, the places where we grew up, and um, it's probably the closest thing we'll ever get to that, honestly, at this level of budget. But yeah, I mean, I think you can only the movie is a little directionless, a little lacking in conflict until the third act. That is, I mean, they kind of thrust a plot in the third act that's sort of out of nowhere. It's like, okay, we have to wrap it up, so we have to advance the movie, in some way or another, because you can only really have so many scenes of guys sitting around drinking beer.
Yeah.
And so, but I think that's kind of to be expected when you base a movie off of a book of photos. So you kind of have to you have to come up with a plot pretty much like whole cloth. Like you have to, there wasn't much to go on except for some photos of a bunch of bikers and then like some descriptors, like some interviews. And so that was really it. And so overall, I thought, it was a decent portrayal of these guys, of this time period. And yeah, Jeff Nichols to me he's always that director that's kind of on the cusp of greatness, where he can never quite reach his apex. I think I put in our doc, he's like the 3.9 GPA of directors, where it's like,
Yeah.
oh, you almost got to 4.0, but not quite. And so overall, I liked it though.
Yeah, because that ending, if this were a more Hollywood movie, Austin Butler's character would have found out that his buddy had been so dishonorably killed, and come back in and reasserted dominance and reclaimed control over the Vandals or some shit. But instead, he just fucks off with his wife to Florida and never rides a bike again, because it gets consumed and turned into something unrecognizable by these other elements that are introduced to the experience, and like slowly corrupt what was just supposed to be a riding club, and eventually it turns into organized crime, and then the fun is over. And the way they advertise this movie, they really make it look like that's what it's about. It's more like that more fully. It's like, oh, it's people getting assassinated, and it's like, no, that's just the window dressing thrown on at the end to explain why it stopped being fun.
Yeah, I mean, it's at the end of the day, it's about a guy who watched a Marlon Brando movie and was like, I want to be that. And that is probably the most interesting subtext to this movie to me, is sort of how Tom Hardy's character is pretty much faking it the entire time. He's the guy who he goes back to his house and his kids and his wife and his trucking job, and he just does this on the weekends, but he sort of puts up this front that he is like the real deal, but he's not. And Austin Butler's character is the real deal, and he recognizes that. He's like, you need to take over this thing. You need to be the leader for this club. And Austin Butler's like, no, because that's not me. And once I do that, I cease to be the person I am, basically. I cease to be that like authentic guy. And then eventually it gets like one layer deeper, where it's like we get introduced to this like high school age kid who sees Tom Hardy biking down the street and is like, that's who I want to be. And so it's like a faker. You see a guy sees a faker and he becomes a faker of a faker, basically.
Yeah.
And so it's very, very interesting in that way. And then eventually he's, of course, the downfall of the entire club, that kid.
Well, and that kid was already that kid was already more real than Tom Hardy's character was. Like he was already like, because when he like tries to convince him to let them join, and he's like, "There's someone you want beat up? We'll kill him for you." He's probably already murdered people. Like they are probably already like a proper gang, whereas these other dudes were just, hey, we are just adults who ride motorcycles. What get drunk. We like to get tuned up at our picnics, and they see them as something that they aren't, and like bringing a gun to a knife fight is a hell of a way to assert dominance over all of those other people. Because I think it's like Carl Glusman's character and that other actor who I can't recognize, the guy with the
Bo Knapp, I think.
Bo
Is that
Knapp,
his name?
yeah.
Yeah.
Those two guys, when they're like after that moment happens and Hardy's character's killed, he's just like, what the fuck do we do? Nothing.
Yeah.
You know, they just stay in the club because like they're kind of trapped. Because if you leave the club, you get fucked up. What's up, honey?
Yeah, you get murdered. Yeah.
Or you get
Yeah,
your
that's-
shoe, or you get your foot shot, like Cockroach. Like I like that whole thing with Cockroach was weird because it's like why did they have to do him like that? Why were they acting so serious?
I think the idea behind that is basically that they're faking a murder, basically, because Tom Hardy is doing that for his own good, essentially, you know, because after he shoots him, you know, he's like, let it bleed a little bit. And it's because I think they're setting up a fake murder so that presumably those guys show up to that guy's house later and they find the blood and stuff. And
the door shot open.
yeah, the door. Yep. Yeah. And so I think that was the idea behind that. But yeah, this movie has, since we're sort of talking about these side characters, it just has a like murderer's row of character actors. And so yeah, I'm curious what you thought of that. I mean, everybody from, you know, Jodie Comer to fucking Michael Shannon just like shows up for a couple scenes
just to give a really based monologue about pinkos and college people, and like and even like Boyd Holbrook had so many weird soliloquies about carburetors. Like he had some of like the he was given some of the most dialogue out of most of this cast, because then like Norman Reedus shows up just to have really bad teeth and to be like really menacing and remind you. I guess is he kind of the indicator of, oh shit, we can't just play by our own rules. There are expectations from coast to coast about like how we are supposed to operate. Okay, I'm connecting the dots a little bit better now. But
yeah. But then it's funny how he's sort of more on their wavelength, where he's like, "Oh, I was sent here to kill that guy, but I'm not going to." Basically,
you guys are too much fun, you know. Yeah,
you guys are too much fun, and then he just sticks around the area so he can rev his motorcycle outside of showings of Easy Rider. So yeah, I think in the end he was more on their wavelength than whatever his California biker gang, you know, wanted him to be.
This movie had shades of like Goodfellas too, and if they had been more,
I've been hearing a lot of that.
If they had been more in the heads of the club members, that would maybe make more sense. If there was my whole life I always wanted to be a biker ganger, you know, then that would probably hold, you know, more water. But like all the interviews with Jodie Comer's character and the guy from Challengers, like Mike Faced, like that's really like what brought it out, because you're just kind of getting the woman's perspective to all of everything going on, like you do in portions in Goodfellas. And so yeah, like he has lots of good ideas and his approach is very interesting, Nichols. But like you say, he just doesn't quite nail it. He's not getting an A+ here on anything he tries to do. But yeah, it definitely looks good. It's the soundtrack is, you know, right out of, you know, a Scorsese movie about this era. Like there are so many songs where I was just like, oh yeah, this has to be here for where we are and what's happening. This makes sense. The vibe is right, but yeah, I wanted it to go further. Like
same. Yeah. Well, I want to hit on that point that you said about, you know, getting into the bikers' heads, because I found myself very conflicted on that point, because it would have been awesome to get kind of more of their inner thoughts and kind of how they felt. And in some ways, we do get some of that out of all of these sort of side characters that barely have, you know, 5 or 10 minutes of screen time. Michael Shannon is probably the one we get in his head the most, because he's sitting there, he's talking about how he wasn't let into the army and how that fucked him up. And his brother was let into the army and then died. And so he felt awful about that. But then, when you really think about it, though, I think the fact that we're not getting into these characters' heads is more true to life, because
Yeah.
this biker gang from Chicago in the 1960s, they're not going to be sitting around talking about each other's feelings. These guys probably had incredibly like surface level friendships, and they were probably talking about motorcycles and girls and fucking and in drinking, and they weren't sitting around talking about their feelings. So it's more true to life that way, I think.
And it's true today. I have a coworker named Ben who's a retired Air Force guy. He broke his back in a top secret room on the airbase here, so he got early retirement. But he was in a biker club with a guy I've talked about in my mentionables before named Matthew Anderson, who's now serving a life sentence for murder. And actually, it's the first time Ben and I ever crossed paths was at his trial, because he just wanted to try and give him a friendly face. But it's like he described that guy as someone you knew not to fuck with, because he had a hair trigger temper, and if you looked at him the wrong way, he'd beat the shit out of you. So you just did what you could to just have a good time with this dude. And this was a guy that he'd come over to his house and have beers, and that he, gave a Barbie electric kid car to just like tool around in, like at their clubhouse and shit. And then the next thing you know, he's murdered somebody, and you're just kind of left wondering, oh my God, could that have been me on the wrong day? Like he's very much like that guy was the Joe Pesci, from Goodfellas person in this group. And you didn't get too deep into who this guy was, because that you were just asking for more problems. It's like you just handed him a beer and laughed at his jokes and just kept on keeping on, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so funny. I mean, in that way, like it still is kind of, you can carry that over to more recent times. And so, yeah, this is, I think, a fairly accurate portrayal, but I don't know if that necessarily makes for a better movie, I guess. And so, what did you think? Well, you had mentioned at the beginning of our review about the accents, and I wanted to touch back on that because, yeah, I have no fucking idea what Tom Hardy is doing. I mean, at the very least, he's like, he's intelligible. Like, you can actually tell what he's saying, unlike a lot of his more recent roles. But then I wanted to call out specifically Jodie Comer's accent is perfect, like absolutely perfect. And she really gets, I think, Midwest Chicago really well. And then you have Austin Butler, who's still sort of like in Elvis mode, but I think he did a pretty decent job too.
He did. And a lot of the supporting characters really didn't quite know who they were supposed to like. And maybe that's a reflection of the fact that they all came from different places. Like they're from like varying parts of the country, so maybe they all sounded different, but Hardy was sometimes he'd be downright sniveling in his delivery, and that just made no sense and did not work for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very, very strange. But yeah, I mean, it is the one thing I was looking it up after the fact, and the movie, it does have those settings pretty well done. And I think that this movie, it wasn't quite filmed in Illinois, but they filmed the majority of this movie, I read, in the Ohio area.
Okay.
Like rural Ohio and small town Ohio. And so I think it does have the setting down pretty well for something like that. But I had one more thing that I wanted to ask you about.
What's that?
That was the ending and sort of what you thought was meant by that. Because essentially we get this ending where Jodie Comer and Austin Butler have moved to Florida, and he's sort of become domesticated, sort of. But what did you think of the ending? What did you think was meant by that? As in, like, sort of the final couple of shots and just the composition of them and sort of the soundtrack. Oh fuck! I already froze.
You already froze. But just to answer your question, I think, I don't know, part of me felt like he was like markers. Well, give me a second, sweetie. What it said to me mostly actually was that he felt a measure of guilt for not stepping up to lead, like what's his was it Joey? Was that his name? The character Johnny. Yeah, Johnny asked him to lead and he didn't answer that call. He didn't like how dark it would take him to the darkness he'd have to get into to answer that call. And so he was pining for riding the motorcycle, but another part of him just feels like, well, I ain't worthy enough anymore, and there maybe was a tinge of regret for that.
Sure. Yeah, I kind of interpreted it as because we get this shot of his face where he's sitting there and Jodie Comer's looking at him and there's motorcycle revving noises in the background.
Yeah.
It's and then the second he looks at Jodie Comer, all of that noise of the revving motorcycles just drops out. Yeah, there's these revving noises in the soundtrack, and then suddenly he looks at Jodie Comer and all the sound drops out, and I sort of interpreted that as she calms his mind almost, where he's found the thing that sort of, I mean, for lack of a better phrase, domesticates him. You know, he's found the thing that calms him down, and so and he's found a degree of happiness, at least. He's content, if not happy. He is at least content, and that's kind of how I interpreted that. But yeah, overall, I really like this, and another sort of worthy entry for Nichols, and I most certainly like this more than Mud. Oh God, I did not.
You
did
not
not
like
really
Mud?
like Mud.
I liked Mud. I liked Mud. Take Shelter. Really liked.
Take Shelter. Yes.
Midnight Special kind of falls into the category of doesn't quite get there. Kind of like this movie. I never saw Loving, so I'm a little ignorant about the quality of that one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of the same deal where he's just, there's something a little pedestrian about the way that he makes movies. And I don't think that's necessarily bad. He's just kind of like I alluded to in my intro to the episode, he's like the working class director. He wants to tell these stories about people in rural areas, people of lower income, people of different subcultures. And I think that's just fine. And I will gladly watch another movie he makes.
Right on. Take your boomer family to it. Family members, they'll get nostalgic. Oh, and I remember you had a note on the doc about it, but that Nosferatu trailer.
Yeah, did you get it?
I did.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, that's the only way to watch it now until Monday, until they're going to release it online Monday, but it's the only way you can watch it, unless there's a cam rip or something.
There's cam rips. They suck.
Is there? Okay.
Yeah, you trust me, you want, until you can, I guess, today, if you can't wait till tomorrow, go to a Bikeriders screening and see it. But, ooh, boy, I'm excited for that. That's going to be really good. Going to be really good. Then now to move on to the mentionables here. Robert Kirkman has a new comic book series, and I've heard about this. Actually,
this is. Oh, you have?
Yeah.
Do you know the twist then?
No, I guess
everyone knows.
Is it the Transformers twist?
Yes.
Because he's kind of the grand poobah of that universe now, isn't he?
Yes. Yeah. So what we're talking about is Void Rivals, the new Image comic from Robert Kirkman, and. Yeah, the whole thing, I don't know, Robert Kirkman, he's always all about this shit, secrets and twists, and he's obsessed with surprises. This is the guy who just up and ended the Walking Dead comic without telling anyone. And this is the guy who, his last comic series, Oblivion Song, he literally sent the entire first trade paperback of the comic to comic shops all over the US before the first issue even came out.
What?
Because it was sort of his pitch to comic book shop owners to hey, please order this. And here's the entire first arc of this comic book before the first issue even comes out. And so he's all about this type of shit, surprises. And And so the big deal with this series is that it was secretly a part of the new Energon universe, the shared Transformers GI Joe thing that Image has going on. And but this is actually, you know, it is an original series because none of these characters have appeared in any Transformers or GI Joe stuff beforehand. Like, it's all original. It just happens to be set in the Transformers universe.
I see.
And so but yeah, I mean, this series is great. I mean, I've already talked about the Energon universe on our podcast, and I just need to, you know, continue hitting that nail on the head because I never thought I'd be the guy who in 2024 would be sitting here telling you that the most exciting thing happening in comics in 2024 is a shared universe based on toys and cartoons from the 1980s. So yeah, go check it out. It's really, really great. All of this stuff has been really, really great.
Stranger things have happened, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I like all these covers that I pulled off and threw in there make me very excited for it.
Yeah.
Mine's a little quick and dirty here because I see you frozen again. But there's beautiful Lake Chida. We spent a week there. It was lovely. It rained most of the time. So we only got, sun a couple of the days we were there. There's November in a sun hat. And here is Luca in the sun hat. You know, he had a good time. He scraped his feet up on the deck. He was always trying to get into stuff. Here's me writing and November writing. And basically, I just want to say enjoy your lakes while you can because the Corps of Engineers are going to be draining this lake next year. Yeah, they're draining the lake to repair the earthen dam at this. So September 2025, and for like the next 2 to 3 years, Lake Chida will be empty, and it'll be a little bit like Lake Mead. We'll find all the dead bodies that have been stashed there. And yes, but then I will be a lot hotter the next time I go. There'll be a lot less to do. No kayaking, no tubing, no fishing. Unless you're just picking up dead fish off the bottom of the muck. Mm-hmm. But I guess if you have a lake, which you definitely do if you live in Minnesota, go enjoy it this summer.
Yeah.
But that kind of does it for us today. We're dealing yet again with our technology issues. So it was a bit painful, but we made it through. And yeah, take your parents to the Bikeriders so that they can get scandalized by violence. And other things that definitely happened in the 60s.
Yeah. And then next week we got that mini-sode from you, right?
Yep. I'll be following through on my promised discussion of the Cassandras of the streaming apocalypse, Lucas and Spielberg. And on July 8th we'll be reconvening, most likely to review Kinds of Kindness after that gets a wider release. And then, further on in July, we'll get something from you for a mini-sode about Deadpool and Wolverine. Looking forward to that one, because it'll probably ruffle some feathers. But thank you for joining us, and have a good couple weeks, man.
Yeah, see ya.